Alright, we are on the next part, just continuing again where we left off. So, this is a very long inquiry, so we've been having to like break up in chunks, and I really don't mean to do that, and I don't like to do that with some types of excerpts, because then it kind of just, I lose track of what I was saying from the last video, and coming back to it just doesn't feel as strong, I'll be honest. It's kind of like keeping the momentum going, but there's just so much to read and kind of absorb. It's just hard to really just continue forward, especially like, if I have like a video limit of 30 minutes. So continuing where we left off. So such is a general view of this phenomenon. And what is that phenomenon? I think it was talking about I think it's the connection of like mind and matter, but mind and matter connected through like vibrations, and everything's essentially a vibration. So we'll just keep like as like a the foundation of just like everything being a vibrational frequency that people interact with each other. And that's kind of when we went into details explaining how your finger can't pass through the desk because there's vibrations that just repel each other to a very articulate extent on this planet, especially. So, where were we? I think I just read this. Okay, right here. So, but we may all observe still something more, relating to that bond of connection which has been so a stumbling block among the moderns. When we come more narrowly to inspect this triplicated chain of causes, between each link there is a joint, if I may so call it. For instance, the aggregate motion of the hammer is, in the bell, converted into atomic motion. Now this cannot be performed simultaneously, though the matter or law according to which it is performed escapes the observation of our senses. This is the latent processus, or the latent process, which Bacon is so anxious to have investigated, and is often noticed among the ancients, particularly by Plato in the Parmenides and Phaedo. The latent schematismus of Bacon, the Latin form or structure, refers to the latent properties of the bodies or other unknown circumstances through which motion is communicated. And as grosser bodies are said to be incapable of contact, a kind of latent schematismus at every joint in the chain becomes also an object of inquiry. The inquiry into the efficient cause, the matter, the latent process, and the latent structure constitutes physics, according to the notions of Bacon, which differs but little from the ancient doctrine. But if we combine the two, we shall have physical science to consist in investigating the nature and the continuity of the material, formal, and efficient causes, together with the laws according to which the chain of efficient causes is propagated, and this not only in the links but in the joints, if it were done. I don't know if I want to read this footer just yet. We'll hold off on that. It is done through the successive links only. We should in a manner have perfected the grand outline of science, though the more delicate parts, the latent processes and forms and substances at the joints which constitute the bonds of connection, should forever be concealed, yet they need not be despaired of. If it should be asked why it is thus to be presumed a priori, that is, triplicated chains of causes is continued throughout nature, the only answer to this is that in every branch of science which has been investigated and thoroughly understood, such is the case. And as we can only reason but from what we know, we reason by analogy, from this known to the unknown, and draw a strong presumption in its favor. It may be false, and it cannot be proved otherwise till all science is perfected, but the burden of finding and demonstrating an exception lies with its opponents, who might thus confute it or limit it. In modern experimental philosophy, it is often laid down as a maxim, that the laws of nature are the only proper objects of human inquiry, and all investigation of causes is stifled by the dogma which maintains that human nature is incapable of investigating their nature, a strange fallacy which seems to be an ignoratio elenchi. The laws of nature, or general facts as they are called, under which obscure expressions are often included the qualities of bodies as well as their matter and the accidents by which they are affected, may be sufficient for the mathematician, as they afford the data from which his propositions may depend. He can rise no higher than his data, nor it is within the compass of his science to prove any simple physical proposition. In the brilliant discoveries of Sir Isaac Newton, certain general laws and qualities of matter gathered by induction, together with the common principles of mathematics, form the data from which the propositions of the Principia depend. And the discoveries deduced by mathematical operations may be pushed on by his successors or to a greater degree of accuracy and approximation to the truth than they have been already. Yet they are merely deductions and links in the descending chain and calculations of effects, but among the data themselves is where we must look for any great advancement of science. Well, that's just kind of summing up human nature of collective knowledge and how we pass down knowledge over the generations, and how things become progressive through that collective knowledge. And it's saying that one of the highest forms is mathematics. So there's really not much to go into detail about that. I went into a lot of this stuff already in the previous 2 videos. If you haven't looked at those, you should look at those. So sometimes I'll have like a big chunk of space between uploading videos. I know I've been doing that lately. That's mostly been because of school, but I plan to do this a lot more and have more videos out, especially with more books coming out. So once we finish this book, I'm going to be starting 2 books. And I'm pretty excited to start those, but enough sidetracking. Let's just keep continuing. In those branches of science which we have attained to any degree of perfection, such as mechanics, acoustics, and some others, we are not content with the mere fact, but we attend to the successive links in the chain of accident, tracing the motion whence it is derived, and to what it is communicated, and investigating also the law according to which it is propagated, and we trace also the chain of being in the existence and contact of its matter, and in its qualities and form, as an example of the bell, but notwithstanding the mighty strides which modern science has taken in the operative division of philosophy, it is manifest what little real progress has been made in the speculative decision in the ascending scale, though every step therein opens almost a new era of discovery. Again, that's more of just kind of explaining how our modern science only looks into stuff that's physically here. So we don't really study dreaming too much, and then the only branch of psychology we have is just the psychology of feeling. Because we don't have a psychology that can be explained mathematically, or has mathematical principles, models, assessments, investigations, cases, and such. What I mean by that is, let's say your body emits a certain frequency when you're upset about something that triggers you. Your body emits a brainwave or signal or a heat signature. Okay. Now, we take that signature and we look at, okay, what is this signature very similar to, and what other frequencies emit this same signature? And I feel like this is real psychology. This is psychology, and then turning it into mathematics. And it's looking at your body's signatures that it emits. Because we have the technology for now, right? We have people that can literally put chips into your bloodstream and then check how much blood sugar you have, or they can check your heart rate. Even simpler stuff. They can take 3D scans of all your bones and check your bone densities. We have the technology for it. It's just a matter of implementing it in I would say maybe controversial ways, because all this stuff really is controversial. A lot of people don't want these, type of medical technologies becoming integrated in human society, because then we kind of lose our humanity, so to speak. You lose your heart feeling, and things just become kind of mechanical, robotic, autonomous, and some people don't like that, and I agree with them. There's certain limitations we should take on using, artificial intelligence and advanced medical technologies. Only in very dire situations. It shouldn't be something we use too much on a regular basis. Because then your body, it's kind of like your teeth. They say that the human jaw got weaker over the generations because we just don't eat, as tough as people were eating back then. But I mean that's just all hearsay. But that's kind of the same idea. It's just the recessing jaw in later generations, and that's due to our diets. It's the same principle essentially. All right, continuing. I will now turn to the result, that matter or substance by which qualities are supported exists, is one of the prime articles of belief among mankind, though its existence can only be inferred from the qualities which it upholds, and it is in this branch, by the chemical resolution of compound substances into more simple substances, that science has of late years made its greatest advancement. Chief of the qualities of matter were resolved by the ancients into its form, and by the union of form with matter the sensible world was supposed to be produced. As I endeavor to bring forward those parts only of the ancient philosophy which may be turned to account, I omit mention of their ingenious metaphysical speculations upon the nature of form and matter, bound and the boundless, and shall merely observe that the system would naturally tend to resolve all qualities of matter into the primary ones of its extension, form, and the absolute hardness or impenetrability of the components, parts, substance, or atoms. Besides the obvious formal qualities of matter, there are certain other qualities which may be termed supposititious, assumed, or occult, inasmuch as the words elasticity, color, inertia, gravity, and many others are words conventionally assumed to express some unknown causes of effects which have been traced no higher, but which still remain desiderata to which the attention of science should be directed, for they may perhaps be resolved into some immediate formal cause, or into several intermediate links in the chain of accidental causes, latent processes, etc. Sir Isaac Newton thus attempted to resolve the elasticity of light as far as it concerned reflection into a latent process, the attractions of a fluid upon the surfaces of bodies. Yeah. See, when I read this, I really understand what they're saying, but I have trouble wording this. So I'm trying to boil this down, but so we have like our academic words that we use for science, right? So everything's calculated for science, but science only tells us stuff that we need to know specifically. Like we don't know what the root cause of gravity is. We can only speculate what is the rudimentary purpose of gravity. Well, we say gravity is due to mass, and the more things have mass, the more gravitational pull it has. But what's the gravitational pull? Why is it that mass it does that? It's that fundamental idea, and then you kind of reason with yourself, and you say, well, okay, maybe mass is a vacuum, but how is it a vacuum? Well, it's a vacuum because we're traveling through space, right? And what is a vacuum? A vacuum is a spiraling type of like helix, and it pulls things in using like a funnel, or using that helix, but having a velocity. So if we think of particles, right? So particles are always vibrating, but we're moving in space-time, right? So we're, if you have that like 3D image of like this, our solar system in your head, our solar system is traveling through space, the sun is traveling through space, and all the planets are kind of following along, spinning around. So there's some sort of velocity or speed going on in there. So that essentially tells you, hey, maybe this is creating a vortex or a vacuum. So then you think, okay, so every particle in on this earth, right, is traveling at the same time. They're vibrating. And we know when things oscillate, it makes a almost circular shape or a sinusoidal shape, and that essentially creates a vortex. So the bigger something is, has more mass, it's creating a bigger type of vacuum or funnel in space-time, if that makes sense. Everything. So that's kind of how you explain mass. And that's kind of what I want to use as like an analogy for this whole like kind of like excerpt right here, because I feel like that's important to kind of think about and kind of have those ideas. Oh my gosh, this is not a footer, this is a whole Bigfoot. I guess we'll read this footer. Interesting. All right. Well, of the ancients. Oh wait. Did I read the top here? Yeah, I did. Right. Yeah, I did. All right. I read that page. Oh, there goes a loud car. All right. Of the ancients, Epicureans alone are supposed to have held the existence of atoms. If I make mistake not, the Pythagoreans did likewise, though not such a willful democracy of atoms as the Epicurus. Nor am I aware that any of the ancients held infinite divisibility of matter. Neither of these opinions, perhaps, can be brought to the test of proof. We can rest only in analogy, but I think the accuracy of the results and calculations upon the atomic theory plainly induce us to prefer the atomic opinion upon the same grounds that our faith in the law of gravitation is strengthened by the accuracy with which the planetary movements coincide with their calculated courses. It rests upon the observation. Yeah, see what I mean? Like, so we understand gravity as like a mathematical calculations, right? And through all this calculation, we can understand the prediction of movement for a lot of stuff. But like I said, we don't know the root cause of how these things work. We only have like some degree of how that all like comes into play, and then we explain that through atomic theory, and atomic theory is explained through like mathematics essentially. And it's really interesting too, because this book was written in the 1870s, right? And I think atomic theory came out in the 1820s, so it hasn't been very long that atomic theory and chemistry has been around since this book has been written. Not like it has today. So these ideas are very fresh, or maybe not very sharp, as they could be today, so to speak. But that's only like a conception that we have of what's going on, or a perception. Okay, so I have no idea where we just freaking left off on. Okay, right, I think we left off right here. The conclusion also, drawn by analogy in favor of atoms from a substance, always dividing and compounding at the same angle, is far superior to an argument drawn from the infinite divisibility of a mathematical line, inasmuch as it is a fair analogy between two physical propositions. The latter is only a mathematical illustration of a physical proposition. They are not at all of the same kind. The subject under consideration is purely material, the illustration purely ideal. Okay, so that's to say, when you draw a line in space, right? So let's say you have like, you're drawing a square. You're drawing a filled-in square, so you have like a colored-in red square on your piece of paper, right? Even though we say, okay, this square that we just drew is two-dimensional, technically, in reality, it's three-dimensional because the marker that we used applied a coat of thickness of marking compound, whatever, I don't know what it is. Forgot what the chemical they use for marking pens is, but in any case, they put in ink, and that ink has a thickness over the surface of the paper. So this 2D thing that we're trying to represent is really 3D, but we say it's 2D. And it's like trying to say, like, you know, if we're trying to draw like a line in 2D space, right? And we're trying to say this is a one-dimensional object. Well, technically, it's that line has a thickness which gives it like a two-dimensional space. So it's a line, and then it has like technically 2 dimensions, but we're trying to say it's one-dimensional. So that's what it's saying in this kind of little excerpt here. So let's just continue. The same may be said of Euler's ingenious argument, all matter is endued with extension. It therefore possesses all the qualities of extension, one of which is infinite divisibility. For it does not follow that because all matter is endued with extension in the concrete, that it has all the properties of extension in the abstract, only that it might have had, if it had pleased God to make it so. The occult qualities of Aristotle are not the nonsense usually fathered upon him, but I prefer the word supposititious. I think that's how you say it. Hypothetical, not only to avoid offense, but in better keeping with what I have written upon theory and hypotheses. Okay, so I'm just making some call-outs there. Alright, continuing. Again, in the phenomenon of color, the metaphysical distinction drawn between the sensation and perception by the mind and the quality of the body, which was the cause of that perception, between the redness with which the senses are affected and the supposititious quality of the body, which so operates upon light as to produce that sensation and perception, cleared away several strange encumbrances. But the grand discovery that redness or any other color may be communicated to several bodies by the mere altercation of their superficial texture has gone far to resolve the coloring quality into the texture or form of the superficies, and to merge the supposititious and conventional quality into a formal cause, one of the primary qualities of matter. From the perception of colors we may trace the chain of antecedent causes of matter and form through the optic nerve, through the eye to the light, to the colored body, and again to the light. And we may trace also the descending chain of accidents or motion from the general unmodified motions of the light, as first admitted into a chamber, and therefore it strikes the body, its alteration at the body, every point of which becomes a center from which a sphere of motion is propagated of such a nature as, when passed through the eye and optic nerve, to produce the perception of color. Damn. Yeah, that's kind of a mouthful. But, I mean, everybody can kind of see what it's saying, you know what I mean? Like, light travels through space, and then it alters everything that it passes through and causes, you know, slight agitations in the particles at which it comes in contact with. So, furthermore, in England, till within the last few years, the Newtonian hypothesis of light has had a very general ascendancy, but at present that of Huygens bids fair entirely to supplant it. From the similarity which obtains in nature between one fluid and another, I would venture to suggest that these two hypotheses may not be altogether and fundamentally opposed, but are capable of being reconciled, and at least in part, and that light has not only a progressive but a vibratory motion also, that to its progressive motion are to be attributed the phenomena of brightness, illumination, shadow, and some instances of reflection, and that upon its vibrations depend the phenomena of color, sight, and the light, and that the vibratory motion requisite for the production of vision is caused by the progressive reflective and impeded motion of the sunbeams, by a change from the aggregate progressive motion of the rays into the atomic vibration of the fluid. Such a hypothesis is afforded by the analogies of air and water, and their progressive motions of winds and streams, and their vibratory motions of sounds and waves. It is a fair hypothesis which, if it be confuted when brought to the test of experiment by induction, may afford some results upon which something more plausible may be offered. The most remarkable of the supposititious qualities of matter are inertia, gravity, and attraction, but the conceptions of Sir Isaac Newton upon the subject of gravity and attraction are perfectly clear and defined. He uses the words, not for the effect itself, as Dr. Clarke in his controversy with Leibniz affirms, not for any inherent quality which matter may be endued, nor for any accidental motion with which it may be affected, but he uses them merely conventionally for the antecedent cause of the effect of gravitation, whether the cause be a formal cause, or whether it be a motion or force communicated through an antecedent chain of being, or whatever it may be hereafter ascertained, by the universal effect of gravitation or the tendency itself, proved by induction from experiment and observation upon the bodies within our reach, and extended by analogy confirmed by observation to the celestial bodies and those which are beyond us, it is evident that such a cause exists, and the knowledge of its existence and of the law according to which it acts are sufficient for all the purposes to which in mathematics it can be applied. Oh man. I don't know if I want to continue. I think I'm going to end it here. Actually, let me just read a little bit more. Actually, I think I can keep going. We're like 26 minutes. Sir Isaac Newton laid down as one of the rules of philosophizing that no other causes ought to be introduced than such as are true and necessary to account for the phenomena, and he followed his predecessors in maintaining the inertia of matter as exerted in the first law of motion as an inherent, though it may be supposititious quality. But to account for the undiminished motions of the planets, he was compelled to assert a vacuum, or at least a quasi-vacuum. Yet he hesitated to maintain gravity as an innate quality of matter, as it would be inconsistent with his own ideas of causation as expressed in his rule. He therefore left directions to succeeding philosophers to seek its cause, and pointed out as a fit subject for speculation and a hypothetical subtle ether, with which the supposed vacuum might be filled, as capable of supplying the deficient links in the chain of causation. So that's saying like vacuum space really isn't vacuum space, it's filled with ether. But we don't understand it's ether. It's just a placeholder for us because we don't have the correct induction to apply to that like existence of vacuum space. But what I was saying earlier about a vacuum is like a vortex, right? So a vortex needs to occur in order for a vacuum to actually like work. So if things are oscillating in space-time, like everything in this earth is vibrating. So but we're also traveling in space-time. So we're traveling in space with the sun, and that's how these astrological things like occur. Like how we say that like every 12,000 years, right? Or 24,000 years is a full cycle of the axial rotation of the Earth. Well, that Earth is traveling through space and it's oscillating, so we can definitely say it's a vacuum, and that's how mass truly works. Let's see here. So I think we also put forth some more. Let's see here. I forgot where I left off at. Darn it. I hate when I do that. I think I left right here, right? Yeah. Many of his professed followers, sufficiently alive to the physical inconsistency, hesitated not to assert the absolute vacuum and gravitation as an inherent quality of matter, not adverting to the insuperable metaphysical difficulty thus introduced, that they eventually maintained two distinct and independent chains of causation, continually by crossing each other and assuming each other's offices. by one of which motion was communicated, through the matter in contact by impulse and vibration in endless succession, and by the other through vacuum by means of occult qualities commonly so called, by either of which the same effects might be produced. Euler and most foreign philosophers more sensible of the real difficulty of the case rejected without a scruple such a version of Sir Isaac Newton's opinions, upon the express grounds that two secondary causes of motion, and one from inertia and another from attraction, were utterly incongruous and inadmissible. But such has generally been the opinion of all metaphysicians. Stewart, physically sensible of the same insuperable difficulty, strangely proposes to resolve all such phenomena into attractions and repulsions, and upon the principles of Boscovich. But I shall merely observe that the experiments from which it is deduced that the grosser bodies never come into contact prove it only because they prove that there is some substance intervening. Yeah, that's right. If they say that the way that the planets form is through the sun. So what the sun does is that it shoots off a solar flare with enough magnitude or a chunk of itself into like a ball of mass, and then that ball of mass, eventually cools down as it gets shot out from the sun, and then it cools down, and then it formulates. But it the sun's mass and its force field at which it generates, these things have like harmonic bands, and that's how our planets that we have today, that's where they lie on. They lie on these harmonic bands that are stable for objects to kind of like float. That's how they kind of explain this. So you're not things are not really like things in the solar system, like the planets, they're not moving away slowly. Well, technically they are, because the sun is expanding, so that means the planet's distance relative to the sun itself is kind of like expanding as well. The harmonic kind of stays the same in its relative position to the sun. That makes sense. And it's going to make adjustments according to the sun's harmonic and vibration. But in any case, the planets are formed from the sun, and then to say that there's like a repelling going on, or that these things stay on the harmonic bands and they don't get pulled, they don't get pulled back into the sun. We don't just get pulled back into the sun directly. We kind of like orbit around the sun, but we're getting pushed away from the sun. So there's something that the sun is doing, like it has mass, but it also has like this fluctuating enough mass to kind of like push objects away, if that makes sense. So it's not creating a vacuum, rather. It's not creating a vacuum like we would say a vacuum does, which is a consistent solid vortex, but it's creating a distortion and chaos to kind of like cause a net discharge away from itself. And that's how it causes this repelling. Then there's something, maybe that other stars or something at the center of the universe, maybe, that does the same thing, if you apply the same principle. That's how I see it. And then that whole repelling and pulling in also may be how ether exists. And that's how they explain ether. But that's how I kind of see all this stuff. It's really hard to really know the truth on all this, because we can only have like mathematical observations at its best. But excuse me, I'm gonna end the video here, and we're gonna continue here. And it looks like we're almost done with the book. We only got like 20 more pages, but probably even less, considering the cover pages and all that stuff, and author's notes, indexes. So, yeah, we made a lot of progress here, and I really want to finish this book, man. We're almost done, so yeah, we'll continue in the next video for sure.